Okay, and we are live. If a couple people in the chat there could just tell me if you can hear me okay and the microphone's coming through all right and that kind of thing, that would be great before we get going. Hi Jennifer, hi Melanie, hi Rick. I'm just going to walk through the basic process and then we'll go through the handbook and stuff like that a little bit real quick. I don't want to bore anybody too much, but just want to show everybody what we're doing. Thank you, good to know. So to start off with the juries, obviously you can just head over to factor.ca, click sign in, or I think in the email I sent you guys I gave you just a direct link to sign in. And once you're here, obviously you're just going to log in with your email address and your password. Be careful to log in with the email address that I emailed you at when I invited you to participate in the jury. Sometimes people have multiple email addresses, and if you don't log in with the one that's your juror profile, then you won't actually be able to hit any of your juries. But when in doubt, just look at whatever address I emailed you at. This will just take you to the basic help page over here, and then where all the good stuff is where it says jury up here in the top right of the navigation. Now, you're going to see a lot on my page because I've got every jury that is going on right now. But when you log in here, you're just going to see 3 juries at most, or you should. If you see anything more than 3, then send me an email. I've got a test one that I'm going to use just so that I'm not showing you anyone's actual applications. But basically, to start off with, for any of your juries, it's going to be the same process. You start off just by clicking on the jury number. That's going to take you to this little page that asks you to accept or decline an invitation to the jury. To be honest, this is kind of unnecessary, but it's a thing that used to be important to how the jury system works, and we just kind of haven't been able to work it out of the system yet. But just hit accept invitation, and then it'll tell you, yeah, you've accepted it. To go back and basically refresh it, once you've done that, just click on jury up in the top right corner again. Navigation bar, I suppose. And then just navigate back to the same jury again. I've got 100 of them here, but you'll just have 3, so it should be pretty easy to find. And you'll notice that after you've accepted it, it'll say accepted over here. So to actually get into the jury, now that you've accepted it, kind of a pain in the butt, but you just click on the jury number again, and now you should be able to see the actual applications that are in that jury. I'm just going to maximize this a little bit. Before I zoom through this page, I just want to note really quickly, there's this messages system on the left over here. You can largely ignore this. It was an optimistic feature that we tried to build into the website before my time here, so that jurors could communicate with each other and discuss the applications and that kind of thing. It is not very useful and doesn't function very well, so I wouldn't bother trying to use it. You will occasionally see messages from me up here. It's usually just to let you know about if there's some small detail about that application you need to know, or if a file has a little bit of problems and I've got an alternative link that you can download it from, or any sort of information I need to let you know about a specific jury or an application. You might see it over here, otherwise you can just ignore this section, it doesn't really matter. And also another thing, sometimes some jurors will click send over here when they think they're done an application. That's not what this is for. That's to send a message. It's part of this messaging system. You can just ignore it. So when you click on your jury, I've just got one artist here. You'll see test artist general. You may see anywhere from 1 to 4 artists listed. I've just got one here today, but if you see more, you can go through and you can do all of the applications. To get started on an individual artist's application, you just click on the artist name. So where it says test artist general. Boom, boom. Just going to maximize this as well. Our website is apparently in love with pop-ups, and you're going to encounter a bunch of these. Anyone who's been in the Factor system a long time is probably very, very familiar. I wish that we could magically wave those away, but for the moment, it is what it is. This page is going to look somewhat similar. You're going to see this messaging system over here again. Again, you can just ignore it unless you see a message from me. The meat of the application is all in the center here. So up at the top you'll see the name of the artist, their website if you want to check it out, and the program they're applying to. In this case it's an artist development application. Just a quick recap, the artist development program is $2,000 that artists can use over the course of a year to subsidize any of their artist development activities. And the juried sound recording is the $25,000 and up program to launch your record, tour it, showcase it, make music videos, market it. Just to the right here, there's a couple good links to the program guidelines and the Juror Handbook. I'll go through the Juror Handbook a little bit more later. And with regard to the program guidelines, I'm not going to ask you to go through there and read 15 pages of very borderline legalese guidelines. If you want to take a peruse through there just to refamiliarize yourself with the program, it's not a bad idea. But as long as you know more or less how the program works and the kind of projects we're trying to fund and that kind of thing, you should be in good shape. My email is on every application here. If you run into any sort of major problems with application materials or a song not working or not being able to download a file or play something, get in touch with me. And then also in the email I sent to everybody at the beginning of the jury, I've included my assistant Charla's email. And so if you have any issues with just like needing to be run through the process or a password reset or anything like that, you can also email her. This next section here is the conflict of interest section. There's a link here to the conflict of interest and confidentiality agreement. I'm going to quickly go through that later as well. But basically, if you have some sort of substantial conflict of interest that you're sure warrants you not being able to objectively assess this application, you can just enter in, I can't do this one, whatever your reason is, and then just click this yellow register conflict of interest button. That just lets me know that you have a conflict and I shouldn't expect you to assess this. I'm not going to click it because it will make it so we can't do anything with the application here, but I'll just head down. So once you've kind of checked to make sure you don't have a confidentiality, or sorry, a conflict issue, you can just scroll down here and this is where you're going to find all the materials for the application. I had a little problem with setting up this test application. For some reason the music player is not showing up, but normally it would be just to the right of the materials here. And you just click, I think the link says literally click here to listen to music and it'll open a little player and then you can just play the assessment tracks right out of the player. Both the artist development program and the juried sound recording lean heavier on the music, with the artist development being about 75% of the score is for music and the juried sound recording is about 60%. I'll get into the scoring criteria down below a little bit more. But basically for each of the materials you're going to assess, you just click on whatever's available here in the links. So for example, this is the artist development program. In this program you listen to one track. You will download an artist bio. Here's a boring form from Factor from about 20 years ago. Probably not a great artist bio, but you'll find funner things. In the artist development program we have an artist development plan, which is a template that people fill out. I've just added another placeholder here. It's probably an image of a cat or something like that. But you can just click through all these and download whatever you want to take a look at. In terms of what you're focusing on, focus on the music. Maybe while you're listening to music or when you're done, make sure you read through the artist bio and the artist development plan. The lyrics are always also here if you want to follow along or you can't quite make out all the words. And then the additional information section here is essentially anything that the applicant wanted to include. That could be press photos or press clippings or links to interviews or letters of reference from people they're going to work with. Could be a lot of things. I would leave that for last. That's essentially kind of optional if you have time. Hopefully you will. Once you've been through the materials, there's a section for feedback down here. How could this application be improved? And then we also have the criteria. We show you the weighting down here out of 25 for all the criteria in the artist development program, and we give you a bit of a reminder of the kind of things you should be thinking about. For example, with the song, the writing, arrangement, composition. With vocals and lyrics, the performance of the vocal, the strength of the lyrics, the range of the vocalist, emotional impact, dynamic, style. you know, every type of music is going to have things that are more important or less important. Punk music is probably not going to be that much of a technique, but classical it probably would be. So you need to use your judgment a little bit there, but we're going to match you up with applications that match your genre specialties, so you should be in your wheelhouse. And then, yeah, you basically just go through the criteria and you can enter a score. A lot of people struggle with a little bit with knowing how kind or how um, harsh, I guess, to be, or critical to be in their scoring. A good reference point is that most applications that tend to get past our funding limit, which is just based on how much money we have to give out each round, tend to score around, at the very least, 80 or higher. So as you're filling these out, you know, score them on their merits. If you're looking at the songs, you know, writing, arrangement, composition, and you're saying this feels, you know, close to a 20 out of 25 for me, at the end of the day, score it on the merits, but when you get your total at the bottom here, that might give you a rough idea of, you know, more or less where you're at overall. If you think this is something that should be close to be funded, but isn't quite there, maybe, you know, you'll find that your total adds up to a 70. If you're up into a 90, maybe you want to take a second look at your criterion. We are working on a scoring rubric that is going to help a lot with this, and we're also looking forward to updating our criteria a little bit, but for now we're moving ahead with the way it's been for a little while. This page is going to look nearly the exact same if you're assessing a juried sound recording application. The only difference is that instead of one song, you're going to see two, and instead of an artist development plan, you're going to see a marketing plan, which are generally anywhere from 10 to 25 pages. They're more free-form. It's not a template. They can put in whatever they want. But down here you'll see the criteria and a field where you can add feedback. It's all basically the same. When you're done, just click Save up in the top right corner, and if you want to ever come back to this and adjust your scores or anything like that, you can just get back into it the same way we did earlier. You would just exit out and click on the artist name when you want to come back to it. Just make sure you save before you're done. The only other thing I want to note while we're on this page is where the feedback section here is. How could this application be improved? This is really valuable to applicants. It's one of the things that applicants are, you know, most excited for, especially if they don't end up getting funded. But even, to be honest, the people who are funded are always curious to get a little bit of feedback from, you know, their peers who may or may not have much more experience than them. I suggest the compliment sandwich if you can. You know, a typical kind of, you know, I liked this, this was great, you might want to work on this, you know, your pitch wasn't so great here, or whatever it is. Or maybe it's part of the marketing plan or the artist development plan that you feel needs some work or might not be totally realistic or whatever. Just try to be kind. Just keep in mind that when people read these comments, they may have just recently found out they're not getting the funding. That's hard for anybody. We don't have a good time letting people know that, but just try to be kind when you're writing these comments. It goes a long way. So that's essentially you know, how you get in around the system. You know, we could have just scored one applicant there. You might have up to 4 on each jury page. Depends on the program. Artist development can be up to 4. Juried sound recording can be up to 3. And we generally are looking for about 15 minutes per artist development and 20 minutes per juried sound recording. Each jury should take roughly an hour. When you're done with the jury and you've gone through each application, you should see a little complete check mark on the right side here. And when you close this out and go back to your list of juries, if you've done every application in a jury, you should see a little check mark beside each jury as well, so you know which ones you still need to do. There's no submit button when you're all done at the end. You just have to save the individual application scores, and then as long as they all get done, you're good to go. So I don't want to go on forever because I know I'll probably bore most people, but I'm just going to run through a few things with the juror handbook really quick, the conflict of interest and confidentiality agreement, and then maybe just go through a few common things I tend to get questions about, and at any point if people want to ask questions, the floor's open, just go for it. The juror handbook is decent. It probably needs a little bit of an update, to be honest, but it runs through everything I basically just said in writing, so if you need it as a reference, it's all there. Also has a link to our conflict of interest and confidentiality agreement, and then a little bit more thorough information about the program mandates and what you'll be assessing. Looks like Rick's got a question here. Can I keep changing my score all week? Yes, essentially. The way a review week works, and sometimes we have more than one of them in a jury round, is that from the day it's open and I send you the initial email that I sent earlier today until the deadline, you can go in and re-listen to things as many times as you want, reconsider the application as much as you want. We only ask you for an hour per jury to a maximum of 3 hours per round. But if you want, you can spend as much time with it. We have some people who are just like really amazing, diligent people, and they spend a lot of time with these applications, which I appreciate because I know the applicants also put a lot of time in. But yeah, you can roughly score things on a Monday, and then on a Thursday take a second peek at it, maybe fine tune your scores and your comments. Yeah, going back to the juror handbook here, we do have a little bit more detailed information about the criteria, the weightings, and then the kind of things you might want to consider, and the amount of funding that's available, and the way the programs work. The detailed scoring information here is a little bit more helpful. To be honest, we're working on a better guide, so this is only going to be so useful. But say, for example, you're looking at a song criteria or musicality or an artist development plan. I find especially with the marketing plan and team sections, they might give you a good idea of some questions to ask yourself. For example, with the artist development plan, that's a $2,000 grant. To me, personally, that's a lot of money, but in the grand schemes of Factor, that's not a huge grant from us. We're not looking to be incredibly critical of an artist development application, but you do want to ask yourselves things like, is the plan reasonable? Is it something that seems like they could actually achieve? If they can achieve it, is their plan likely to actually advance their career in any way? Or even just like simple things like, have they just seemingly put thought into how they're going to do what they want to do? Does it just make some common sense? The artist development plan is meant to be a little bit more administratively simple and a simple application. There's not a lot of room for great detail, and that's kind of intentional. So those are some good ideas of what to ask yourself there. I want to talk about the vocals and lyrics criteria for a second, because we always, every deadline, we get a number of applications that are instrumental pieces. That's definitely okay by us, but a lot of times jurors are a little confused about how to assess that. There's more information down in the FAQ down here, but essentially what you're doing is you're going to do your best to pick out the lead melody instruments. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's a few. Sometimes you might get really complicated instrumental pieces, and you might have to use your best judgment a little bit. But at the end of the day, we're looking at a lot of the same things a lead vocal would have. A great performance, good delivery, some sort of emotional impact, some mood, some style, some tone, technique, pitch clarity, things like that. So if you do get an instrumental, don't just put a 0 in there. Sometimes that happens, and then we have to go back to people. Do your best to score it based on the instrumental itself. And then there's just 2 criteria I want to talk about specifically with the juried sound recording program. In the JSR program, there's actually 2 criteria for your plan and the people involved. So the first one is the marketing plan and presentation. This includes their bio, the marketing plan, letters of reference, any sort of materials they provide on what they want to do. Here again, you're kind of looking at, how solid is the writing? Have they communicated what they want to do well? There's a goals section in the juried sound recording program. So the way I kind of look at things in terms of a good narrative for the artist is you want to look at the biography as sort of the context for who they are, the goals as their high level, what are the large things they want to achieve without getting into too much detail, and then the marketing plan itself should be full of detail, speak to who they're going to work with on almost every part of their plan. And that's where things tie into the team criteria over here. The team criteria is a tricky one because for a long time, many people thought that what we're looking for there is the best record label, the best booking agent, the best manager, the best sync agent, publicist, what have you. We're not as concerned about the stature of somebody in the industry, as much as we are about whether or not the team in place can get done the plan that the artist is putting forward. So sometimes that can mean just members of an artist group have certain abilities and are capable in some logistical ways. It might mean that an artist has reached out to a number of potential team members, publicists, a tour manager, whatever they're going to need to get the job done for themselves, and they've kind of just set themselves up so that if they do get the funding, that person already knows what their project is and they're ready to go out of the gate. At the end of the day, the team just needs to be able to accomplish the plan that's been set forward. So it doesn't need to be the best team member in the world, as long as they seem like they have a good, successful chance of accomplishing things. How successful you think that team will be, even if it is more of a DIY approach, more of an independent approach, that's up to your judgment. But just consider the plan, what they want to do, and how capable you think the people are of doing it. And that can include artist members and friends and informal network as well. I think we've covered most things in the assessment, or frequently asked questions down here. At the end of the day, if you have any kind of issue, you can just email me. My email's plastered all over this thing. You can also email my assistant Charla, especially if you just need a quick password reset and that kind of thing. My inbox tends to be flooded every day during a jury review, so if I don't get back to you right away, don't stress out too much. One way or another, we'll get it all sorted out. Lastly, I'm going to try to keep this real short because it's kind of the dry part. I just want to go through our conflict of interest and confidentiality agreement really quickly. Conflicts of interest can show up in a few ways. Just because you're friends with somebody who's applying doesn't necessarily mean there's a substantial issue. The first and foremost thing that we're worried about is any sort of fiduciary conflict of interest. So if you stand as a professional to gain in terms of money or your career, getting a nice boost from working on a project that you may be involved in assessing, or even if it's your family or something like that, those are good things to be very aware of and consider. If you're ever not sure how substantial a conflict is, just send me an email, we'll talk about it, we'll work it out. We'll usually lean on the side of if something seems like it could be an issue, we'll just reassign you to another application or have you sit out from that program. We have a lot of room between the two programs that if you're heavily involved in a couple of juried sound recording applications, we can just assign you to the artist development program or vice versa. There's also optics to consider, even if sort of on the maybe in the nitty-gritty of your relationship with someone, there might not be an issue there, but if just how it looks, with you being very close to somebody or something like that, especially if the person's very high profile or something like that, we're happy to just make alternative arrangements. A lot of the time it's a lot easier, and there's no shortage of applications to assess. So long story short, if you have any kind of conflict of interest and you're not 100% sure about it, just send me an email. I'll probably give you a call. We'll just talk through it. And if you're sure that something's an issue, you can just write within the application, enter your reason, and hit that it's a conflict, and we won't bug you about it again. And then lastly, just want to talk about confidentiality. There's a few things to consider here. The number one, first and foremost, it works both ways. Jurors are all anonymous in the process. We're not going to tell any applicants who you assessed. It's a small industry, and things would probably get pretty shady pretty quickly if we were to do that. Same way on the other side of things, we're trusting jurors to not share any of the details of an application with anybody else, and that includes even just the fact that that artist or applicant applied. As far as the outside world is concerned, anything you look at within the jury is off limits. You don't talk about it during a jury review. There are a couple exceptions in terms of where you can talk about the process and other ways. You're not in this agreement, if you're going to participate, you're agreeing that you're not going to post or publish or share any of the details of an application. Here we say observations of applications or juries in which you participate. This includes social media, blogs, your website, that kind of thing. There is a caveat here, though, that you are generally allowed to talk about the process, you know, similar to lots of other jury processes. If you just want to talk about how it works in general or your experience with it without getting into any specific details about an applicant or an artist or an application, that's okay. Be careful with this. It is, you know, tricky territory. You do want to just be respectful of the applicants, your other jurors, and your own private information. If an occasional question we get from jurors is they might come across an application that they loved, just genuinely, and they might be interested in working with an applicant later down the road. One thing we ask is that during a jury round, you don't communicate with any applicant. That would be inappropriate, can get real weird real quick. We don't want any sort of communication while you're in a jury round. We are open to, once a jury round is concluded, and when I say concluded, I don't mean just that you've done your part, but that the results of the jury are now public, the jury is closed, all of our results are in, and we've used the assessments to determine who we're going to offer funding to, and that's completely resolved. When that's happened, I would still probably give it a month or two just to, you know, make sure everything's free and clear. But at that point, if you did want to reach out to someone and not necessarily talk about their application in the jury, but just, you know, say that you appreciate their work and their art and that you'd be interested in sitting down and talking, that's not a problem. If you have any questions about that or you're not 100% sure how to approach that, please reach out. And then lastly, just if you download any materials from the jury, just make sure you destroy them when you're done. Don't share that. It's all confidential. That's part of the process. It is 3:30. I've almost kept to half an hour, which is good. At this point, I'm going to hang out as long as anyone has questions, and then we're going to put this tutorial up just permanently on our YouTube here for anybody in the future who needs to refer back to it. But if anyone has questions, looks like there's still half a dozen of us here anyway. Feel free, ask as much as you want. We'll hang out until people get tired. As you can see, we've got a lot of juries this round. This is our largest intake of all time, I think, at least as long as I've been here, and they've been going up almost every round since I started here 3 years ago. We're at about 1,300 applications this round, which I think speaks to some of the work we're doing to reach out to some communities we haven't always served and that kind of thing. It's just great to see all these applications coming in. Obviously that means we have a lot more administration to do, but you know, that's all part of the job. Our jury team is about 1,700 people right now, including artists, broadcasters, music industry, music journalists. It's quite a big crew that we've got now. So anyone who is out there, just want to say I appreciate you being on the team and helping us out. It's quite the process. Okay, I'm not seeing too many questions in the chat, so maybe we'll just leave it there for now. Again, if anyone needs anything as you're working through things, my email is just jeremy.claver@factor.ca. You're also welcome to reach out to my assistant Charlotte, charlotte.bryan@factor.ca. We'll put that in the chat. And otherwise, my phone's always there. Please keep in mind my inbox is going to be slammed, so if you don't hear from me for a couple days, don't stress about it too much. And just keep in touch if anything comes up or your availability changes or you have any sort of family emergencies or anything like that. Thanks everybody. I think we'll call it a day there. Thanks for tuning in.